What turned the U-boat, once the pride of Nazi Germany's navy, into nothing more than a drifting steel coffin at the bottom of the cold Atlantic? Why did over 30,000 young men vanish without a trace once they boarded these submarines? And what really happened inside those narrow, suffocating tubes deep beneath the waves? In today's video, we descend into one of the darkest and least spoken chapters of modern warfare. A world of silent hunters that became hunted, of invisible weapons that claimed more of their own than they ever did the enemy. These were not just machines of war. They were floating death traps, and they left behind a graveyard across the ocean floor. So fasten your seat belt, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about submarines. It's a story about fear, sacrifice, and the quiet horror of war beneath the surface. But first, you just might change your luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Throughout the history of modern warfare, few machines have inspired as much dread as Germany's U-boats. They were ghosts beneath the waves, silent, invisible, and merciless. By the end of World War II, these submarines had sunk more than 2,700 Allied ships. But behind that staggering number lies a darker truth. Of the roughly 40,000 crewmen who served aboard the U-boats, more than 30,000 never returned. That's a death rate of over 70%, a figure more terrifying than even the bloodiest battlefields on land. But before they became the nightmares of the Atlantic, U-boats had surprisingly humble beginnings. The story begins in 1850, when a German engineer named Wilhelm Bauer sketched a primitive design of a military submarine. It was a leap of imagination, futuristic and bold. And during its very first test in the harbor, it promptly sank to the bottom of the sea. But Bauer didn't give up. He kept experimenting, improving, and dreaming. Nearly 50 years later, Germany began to take submarines seriously. As the arms race with Britain pushed the cost of warships to staggering heights, German naval strategists realized they didn't need bigger ships. They needed smarter weapons, and so began the era of undersea guerrilla warfare. By the time World War I broke out, Germany had 28 combat-ready submarines in service, and within just weeks, one of them, the U-9, made history. On a quiet September morning in 1914, the U-9 encountered 3 British cruisers off the coast of Holland. One by one, it fired its torpedoes, and in less than 1 hour, all 3 enemy warships had been reduced to burning wreckage. Over 1,400 British sailors died. The age of the submarine had truly begun. But here's what most people don't realize. Those early U-boats were not true submarines. They spent most of their time on the surface like ordinary ships. They only submerged to evade or attack. Above the waves, they ran on diesel engines, powerful but loud. Those engines also charged the onboard batteries, and when the U-boat dove below the surface, it had to rely entirely on that crude battery system. No diesel, no fresh air, no margin for error. At first, U-boat commanders followed the old naval rules. They would stop merchant ships, allow the crew to evacuate, and only then sink the vessel. It was a brutal game, but still governed by a strange sense of honor. That honor, however, would not last. Soon, the British introduced a deadly trick: Q-ships. Disguised as helpless merchant vessels, these ships carried hidden artillery, and when a U-boat surfaced to inspect, the trap would spring open, and the submarine crew would be killed instantly. After several commanders died in these ambushes, Germany changed course. No more warnings, no more mercy. From that moment on, every ship, military or civilian, was a target, and the word U-boat began to haunt the shipping lanes of the world. What began as a technical experiment had become something else: a symbol of fear, a weapon of terror, and a machine of death for enemy and crew alike. If the sinking of 3 British warships by U-9 was a brutal debut, then the attack on the RMS Lucatania was the moment the world realized no one was safe at sea anymore. It happened on May 7, 1915. Germany's U-20 submarine spotted a massive passenger liner approaching the southern coast of Ireland. It was the RMS Lucatania. On board were more than 1,900 people, men, women, children, and over 100 American citizens. To the world, it was a symbol of peace, a floating city far removed from the battlefield. But to the U-boat commander, it was something else, a potential threat, a target. At exactly 2:10 p.m., a single torpedo struck the Lusitania. Within minutes, the great ship began to list. Panic erupted. Lifeboats were dropped in chaos. Some passengers were thrown into the icy water. 1,198 people died. Among them, 128 Americans. Germany later claimed the Lusitania was carrying weapons and ammunition, and some historians believe that may have been true. But to the world, and especially to the American public, it didn't matter. What mattered were the bodies of children washing ashore, the photographs, the grief, the disbelief. President Woodrow Wilson had tried to keep the United States out of the war. But after Lusitania, the pressure was too great. The rules had been broken. The line between soldier and civilian had been erased, and the age of gentleman's warfare was over. Germany promised to limit submarine attacks on passenger ships, but that promise didn't last. The floodgates had already opened, and morality could no longer contain the war at sea. The ocean, once governed by codes and flags and warning shots, had turned into a silent killing field. Invisible enemies struck without warning, and every voyage became a gamble with death. When the guns of World War I finally fell silent in 1918, the world believed the nightmare was over, but the seeds of something far worse had already been planted, because the story of the U-boats was far from finished. When World War I ended, Germany was left in ruins, economically shattered and politically broken. And the Treaty of Versailles made sure it stayed that way. It forced Germany to disband most of its military. It stripped away its navy, and it strictly banned the development of submarines. But the Germans, they were not a people to kneel forever. As early as the 1920s, German engineers began finding ways to quietly defy the treaty. They opened submarine design offices in neutral countries like the Netherlands and Sweden. They signed shipbuilding contracts under foreign names, but the blueprints they drew were not for export. They were seeds for a new generation of U-boats. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, he made no effort to hide Germany's ambitions. He openly rejected the Versailles Treaty. He vowed to rebuild the German military. And with that declaration, the Silent Fleet returned. At the center of this rebirth was Admiral Karl Dönitz, a former U-boat commander in World War I. Dönitz wasn't just building submarines, he was building a new strategy. Unlike the solo missions of old, Dönitz envisioned a coordinated force, a pack of predators. He called it the Wolf Pack. Instead of a lone U-boat stalking a convoy, dozens would spread across the ocean, communicating in code. And when a target was spotted, they would converge from all directions. One submarine was deadly, a dozen was unstoppable. This wasn't just innovation, it was transformation. When war broke out again in 1939, the U-boats wasted no time proving their power. On the very same day, Britain declared war on Nazi Germany. U-Boat U sank the SS Athenia, a passenger liner carrying over 1,000 civilians. More than 100 people died. Berlin claimed it was a mistake, but the message was clear. This would be no ordinary war. No front lines, no rules, and nowhere was safe. To Hitler, the Atlantic Ocean was not just water. It was a battlefield. Every bullet, every tank, every soldier headed for Europe had to cross that ocean. And all it took was one submarine to turn a cargo ship into a floating grave. As night fell over the Atlantic, U-boats would surface like shadows. They crept just beneath the waves, avoiding radar and patrols, waiting. And when the time was right, they struck. A silent convoy, a flash, an explosion, then screams in the darkness. This was not just war, it was psychological warfare, and the fear it caused stretched farther than any torpedo could reach. From the outside, a U-boat might have looked like a marvel of engineering, but inside, it was a different world. A U-boat wasn't just a weapon, it was a trap. Each vessel measured only about 50 cubic meters in livable space. Yet nearly 50 men were expected to survive together inside it. No sunlight, no fresh air, no escape. Only the captain had a private space, barely the size of a closet. Everyone else slept in rotating shifts. No one had their own bed. Some men slept on top of torpedoes. Others curled between pipes, surrounded by the constant hum of machinery. And that machinery never slept. Each dive turned the U-boat into a sealed capsule. The air quickly grew stale. Within 24 hours, carbon dioxide levels spiked. Headaches, dizziness, nausea. It felt like slow poisoning because it was. After a few days, the smell became unbearable. Sweat, oil, rotting food. The stench clung to every surface, every strand of hair, every breath. Water was rationed, only 2 gallons per man per day. That included drinking, cooking, and washing. After weeks at sea, skin began to break out. Rashes, sores, infections. But that still wasn't the worst part. The real terror came from the silence. When a U-boat was detected, the order was simple: dive. Engines were shut down. Lights were cut. The crew froze motionless in the dark. And then came the pings. Enemy sonar, echoing through the steel walls. Each ping was a death sentence waiting to land. Sometimes there was an explosion. Sometimes nothing, just silence. And sometimes that silence lasted forever. Many U-boats didn't explode. They simply sank, vanished without a sound. No distress signal, no survivors, just a tomb sealed in steel, resting on the ocean floor. A single battery malfunction could release chlorine or hydrogen gas. A spark could ignite an explosion. The vessel would become a coffin, killing everyone on board in seconds. Inside the U-boat, there was no room for fear, but fear was always there. It lived in the shadows. It breathed in the recycled air. It whispered through the creaks of metal as the pressure built around them. The U-boat was built to kill, but it could kill its own just as easily. And the men inside knew that every second, every dive, every breath. For years, the U-boats ruled the oceans like invisible predators. They slipped past patrols, struck without warning, and disappeared into the deep. But by 1943, the hunters had become the hunted. 1 month changed everything. May 1943. The crews called it Black May, and for good reason. In just 31 days, 43 U-boats were destroyed. Nearly half of all deployed submarines never came home. It wasn't just a tactical loss. It was a massacre, a collapse. The U-boat fleet had become unsustainable. Why? Because technology had finally caught up. And this time it was on the side of the Allies. Radar, once too large to fit on aircraft, had now been miniaturized. Long-range patrol planes like the Liberator and Catalina now swept the Atlantic skies with deadly efficiency. These planes could spot U-boats even at night, even through clouds, even as they surfaced to recharge batteries. No more safety under the cover of darkness. But the real killer was sonar. Destroyers had evolved. No longer just escort ships. They became predators. With sonar, they could hear a U-boat lurking beneath. And once detected, they dropped depth charges with surgical precision. Explosions shattered the silence below. Steel cracked. Water rushed in. Men died in seconds. The Allies also created hunter-killer groups, naval task forces designed solely to seek and destroy U-boats. They didn't defend, they hunted. The vast ocean that once gave U-boats endless hiding places had become a cage. Every lane was patrolled. Every silence was suspect. Admiral Dönitz, the architect of the wolf packs, was forced to order a temporary withdrawal. Even he knew the tide had turned. From that point forward, the age of the invisible steel wolf was over. U-boats no longer ruled the waves. They drifted through a battlefield where they were no longer ghosts, but targets. Their death rate became so high that new recruits stepped aboard already half resigned to their fate. The iron confidence of the early war years had rotted into dread. Every mission could be their last, and for thousands, it was. By the time World War II ended, Germany had lost more than just ships. It had lost an entire generation beneath the waves. Of the 40,000 men who served aboard U-boats, over 30,000 never returned. That's not just a statistic. That's a generation of brothers, sons, students swallowed by the sea. Most of them were under the age of 25. Many had barely finished school. Some had never kissed a girl. They trained for weeks, boarded the U-boat, and vanished forever. No grave, no funeral, no goodbye. Today, dozens of U-boats remain at the bottom of the North Sea, the Irish Sea, and the vast Atlantic. Their hulls rust in silence. Their machinery is long dead. But their stories still echo. Each steel shell is a tomb. Each rivet's a memory. Each sonar ping that once searched for them, now long gone. But their sacrifice still lies waiting to be remembered. They were told they were the wolves of the sea. Silent, deadly, unstoppable, but in the end they were human, terrified, alone, dying in the dark. If today's story made you pause even for a moment to reflect on the price of silence and the cost of war beneath the surface, then share your thoughts in the comments below, because some ghosts still deserve to be heard. And if you want to keep diving with us into the mysteries history tried to forget, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next video.